want to be a leader who hears the voice of his people. I want to be a solution to my people, not a problem to my people.
Our mission is to empower dedicated young people like these, to give them the tools that will make them effective peacemakers and entrepreneurs. We do this in northern Uganda, where former child soldiers are still suffering from the deeper consequences of a conflict that ended 15 years ago. We do this in South Sudan, a young country plagued by civil war. We do this in South Africa, Cape Flats, an area that has been dominated by poverty, violence, and exclusion since the apartheid era. We also do this in Mexico, an industrialized country where crime and violence bear massive costs on the lives and prospects of millions. We do it in the United States, a rich country that knows no shortage of violence in some of its neighborhoods. We trust these young people with knowledge and resources so that they can help their communities on their path to lasting peace and sustainability. We go into remote, underserved areas and places to establish community learning centers where children, youth, and adults can access knowledge, skills, and connectivity. Since 2012, we've worked in these and many other ways to nurture seeds of hope where peace would seem like a distant dream. The challenge is immense. So is our ambition at WPDI. Meet Khadija, a young woman who experienced years of violence, a young woman who did rebound and became an amazing peace leader.
We need to work towards solving the injustices in our community before we can even start the conversation about finding peace within our communities. So I'm an activist for injustice, I'm an activist for equality for everyone.
Forest Whitaker has developed a model that really helps the people to take their situation in charge and to change things. And this is very important, and this is why we believe we have to be there.
Little steps, big progress. When peace is achieved, it only looks like a grand tapestry woven by forces of history. But in truth, peace begins with individual threads. Each of us, any human being, can be such an individual thread if we feel empowered and trusted. Meet Ndege, who started with us in 2014, coming from a place that had known no peace for decades. She is now a recognized peace builder in her country and will not shy away from calling upon national and local leaders to explore concrete solutions for building peace in South Sudan.
We are all South Sudanese, and this is our country.
It's time to hold the pen, but not the guns.
Peace is fragile by nature, but it can always be achieved if we choose to strive for it. This is the mission of WPDI.
They are hajarin struggle for asande in bright future. They are scaring algeja jambutina balin.
Ladies and gentlemen, I would first like to express my gratitude to the organizers of this conference for inviting me to speak before such a distinguished audience. While I wish I could be there with you in person, it's a great pleasure for me to speak to you and present the work of my organization, the Whitaker Peace and Development Initiative, whose mission is to empower and transform youths from areas of conflict and violence so that through development, they can build a more peaceful and prosperous future for both themselves and their communities. WPDI is now approaching its 10-year anniversary, and we've expanded to operate within 8 countries. However, its idea was sparked 15 years ago when I was in Uganda to film The Last King of Scotland. I visited a campus called Hope North, which was formed to shelter former child soldiers. When we think of child soldiers, we often picture children carrying guns with a cigarette at their lips, but we mostly overlook what happens to them afterwards. They are traumatized and rejected by their communities because of the atrocities in which they took part, whether by force or by choice. They're doubly cursed. As I met with these children and youths, I was deeply struck by our conversations. Beyond the hollow look in many of their eyes, there was a clear glimmer of hope that still lingered. Despite whatever they had experienced, there was still possibility that needed nurturing. When I spoke with them, so many told me that they didn't want to be treated as victims. They wanted a chance to change their own lives. The look in their eyes took me back to my own childhood in Los Angeles, when many of my peers became victims or participants in the gangs that were developing in my community. So as I spoke with them, I felt a sense of responsibility and set out to offer youth from areas of conflict with the opportunity to access their own strength and power, rather than defining themselves through violence. I began doing this through UNESCO, first as a Goodwill ambassador and later as a special envoy for peace and reconciliation. That relationship showed me that I had to do even more and gave me the push to found WPDI. Throughout the past decade, I've learned that it's not enough to just remove a source of conflict from someone's life. If that person is unable to fill their void with something new, like a community, an education, or a job, she or he will never find peace. So WPDI begins by targeting a location and makes partnerships there that guide us to select appropriate children and youth from conflict-affected areas. We build community learning centers to host our training and educate participants in our 4 pillars: conflict resolution, life skills, computer technology and communication, and social entrepreneurship. We've built 14 of these CLCs to date, in which this training typically lasts for a year, though our commitment to participants extends for a full 5 years. Through WPDI, we create opportunities for them to use their skills directly in their communities. You've just seen a short film about WPDI's youth, some of whom have become community leaders who are recognized both for their capacity to mediate conflict and to develop socially minded businesses. As mediators, they are trained to help groups in conflict discuss issues in a peaceful and transparent manner. They're also trained to teach conflict resolution and trauma healing to local leaders and to children in schools, so that with time, a culture of peace and nonviolence can be established in the daily values, attitudes, and behaviors of their whole communities. Through WPDI, we have young people organizing mediation processes, informing villagers about gender-based violence, and our youth even took our methodology and applied it to keep their communities safe from COVID-19. Through our vocational training, people find jobs and create ideas for small businesses that can help to generate revenue for themselves while also developing their communities. This business training has an 82% rate of success, and we've now financed 300 of these small businesses. Social entrepreneurship is an important element of peace building, since many of the greatest conflicts throughout the world are caused by a lack of understanding through people due to basic unmet needs, and through struggles over a lack of necessary resources for survival. So we try to provide our participants with knowledge and skills that can help them make a difference in their own lives as they become mediators and social entrepreneurs. And we teach them that in order to achieve success, they have to understand how to work with others, seeing people for their differences and collaborating with them to build a future together. The communities in which we operate are very diverse. For instance, we're present in South Sudan, a country that is still struggling with a civil war that started 8 years ago. In Uganda, we work in the Acholi region to rehabilitate former child soldiers, most of whom had been forced to serve in the infamous Lord's Resistance Army. In Uganda, we also support young people at the Kiryandongo refugee settlement, where many residents seem to have brought their ethnic rivalries across the border. In Chiapas, Mexico, we help young people from indigenous communities create solutions to better integrate their region into the cultural and economic fabric of the country. We have programs in urban cities in Tijuana, Mexico, and Cape Town, South Africa, where our youth have been regularly affected by gang wars. We have also developed conflict resolution programs at schools located in vulnerable areas of Southern California, helping young people mediate conflicts among their peers, which has led to positive results for their academics and their general safety and well-being. The differences that exist among these places are immense, and there is clearly no silver bullet to address the challenges that each of them faces. The one thing that we know for certain is that any lasting solution will have to come from the very people who live in these places. This is why our primary focus is on youth as a demographic, They are especially open to trying new solutions on their own. We provide them with skills and resources they can in turn use in their own terms to create change. Ours is an empowerment approach. We support them by helping them to help others. This is how we have been able to obtain consistently positive results in places that have their own individual challenges. And these positive results are tangible. WPDI's work in Uganda has been recognized by that nation's Prime Minister as well as the United Nations as an example of best practices for other NGOs. Through the combination of these efforts, we now touch nearly 500,000 beneficiaries each year and have directly impacted 1.3 million participants around the world. As we mark our anniversary, our 10th year anniversary next year, we'll be expanding our programming to include Saint-Denis in France, as well as continuing to expand our conflict resolution and trauma healing work to New York and additional nations in Africa. We experience positive growth annually, which we owe in large part to the successes that our youth meet every day through their work on the ground. I'd like to share some examples of that work on the ground with you. In South Sudan, one of our young women managed to mediate a lethal conflict that had made enemies of two tribes for a decade. She succeeded where even officials and UN teams had failed. In Cape Town, local authorities requested our peacemakers to assist them in reducing domestic violence in difficult neighborhoods. This effort was even noted by the President of South Africa. And in Mexico, one of our youths named Jose received a national award and an international prize for the business he established to help indigenous populations grow and sell organic food in Chiapas. These youths are having a very real impact on the world. As I've been inspired by these young women and men, my life as a humanitarian has taken me to places where I never imagined I'd ever visit. These places have been even as unique as like the town of Wau in remote South Sudan, where I found myself with the UN representative for children in armed conflict, Lila Zerige. We had traveled for hours on a dirt road to meet with rebel leaders and convince them to release the children enrolled in their ranks. It wasn't easy, but it worked. We successfully freed 150 youths. This victory was made even greater through our ability to take our results back to the capital and convince the South Sudanese president to order an additional release of 150 child soldiers, and even sign a commitment to cease enrolling children in the National Army. Later, Lila invited me to address the UN Security Council in New York and make a case for the stronger action to be taken to end the practice of child soldiers. Wau felt very distant, and yet there was a clear bond that was happening in South Sudan. What was happening in South Sudan could be taken to New York, and what was decided in New York could be taken to South Sudan. The greatest lesson I can share from the decade I spent with WPDI is that there is power in youth, power that we must tap. For many years, we've seen that youth mobilize on major issues like systemic racism, gun violence, gender inequality, and climate change. And we listen to them. In some cases, we invite them to speak before governments, before parliaments, or even the United Nations. But time after time, we ultimately return to business as usual because we miss the fundamental message that youth have given us. And that message is simple. They are ready to take action, and they need us to trust them with resources to do so. We cannot keep them in the waiting room any longer. As I speak to you today, my message to world leaders is to treat young people as true partners and ensure that they can contribute to the change that we want to build. Let's be the champions for those who don't get to be inside this room with us. It may not be easy, but if we pursue this goal together, our planet can truly be transformed. We each have the power to reshape the world. Thank you for your attention. Thank you.